call this Thursday, March 18th, 2021 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Chelmsford Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information, the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford Telemedia website, www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Please note if you'd like to watch this meeting but do not plan to present to the committee or speak during public comment, we ask you please do so at live.chelmsfordtva.org or on your television, Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 37. By doing so, you will help reduce demand on the online meeting platform. Thank you. We do have the chat function back this evening. I just remind everyone that the chat, even if indicated private or you believe you're having a private chat, it is public record, and even private correspondence will be part of the public record for this evening. First on the agenda, we have approval of minutes of the March 11th, 2021 minutes. Does everyone have a chance to review those?
Yep.
I actually have not, so if we are voting, I'm going to abstain. Anita, I think you're shaking your hand. You have no voice. You have no audio.
I have not either.
Okay.
I'll abstain.
You want to just wait?
So, Jim, do you want to wait till next week to?
Yeah, we can either wait or the five remaining members can vote if they feel comfortable. Either way,
I'm fine with waiting.
just wait.
Yeah.
Waiting's fine.
Okay, well, we'll put off the vote on the March 11th minutes until next week. Next up on our agenda this evening, we've reviewed the fiscal year 22 budget for the Finance Department, which includes accounting, assessors, information technology, treasury, and collection. And with us this evening, we have John Souza, our Finance Director and Treasurer. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. Just like to review, we had an opportunity to review the budget with in detail with Anita, our liaison. It was a couple of weeks ago at this point, and just like to walk you through. Anita went through it in detail with us, and the budget packet that I submitted to everyone. Just if we start on page 3 is probably a good place. That has a personnel summary on that page, and you'll see that the budget for FY22 is includes no new positions. It's based on the 14.4 full-time equivalent personnel, as it has been for a few years now. And if we flip the page and then we go to the first office will be the Treasurer Collector's Office. And the personnel budget is increasing just about $10,600 or so, which is about a 2.9% increase. That just covers the 2% increase in the non-union pay scale, as well as increases in longevity. There are two employees that are reaching their 15-year milestone in FY22. If you look at the expense budget, that's level dollar funded at just over $218,000. What I'll do is I'll go through the different divisions, and if anyone has any questions, please ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. So that's the Treasurer Collector's Office. Moving forward on the next page is our Information Technology Department, and that includes 2 personnel. The personnel budget is increasing just about $6,900. Before I go further, I can try to put up the PDF file if you allow me to share
Certainly.
the screen. Okay, one moment. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes, thanks, John.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm told, I'm not sure if telemedia can help, Ted Luter is in the waiting room, I believe. I'm not sure if you see someone with the name Ted.
No, I haven't
Okay.
Anna, if
Oh,
Anna is.
Okay,
Certainly let me-
that's okay. We can, so, sorry for the interruption. So on personnel services, that's increasing just over $6,900, or just a little over 3%. Under expenses, that the expense budget's increasing just by $300 to $274,600. If you look under computer maintenance and telephone, what's going on there is just we're reallocating money from the computer maintenance line to the telephone line. And what that's all about is that's part of the effort. You may recall me mentioning in a prior year. What we're doing now is we're, for the landlines only for all of the various town departments, what we're doing is rather than spending time breaking that up by each line item budget, the landlines only are being charged basically to the technology budget. So that's the reason for that. And then there's really contracted services decreases slightly, but there's really not too much change in the technology budget overall. And then moving forward, the next area that we'll look at is the assessor's office, and that's increasing. The personnel budget's increasing $9,365, or just over 3%. That's just due to non-union, the non-union pay scale increase and steps for employees that may be eligible. If you look at the expense budget, it's increasing just about $8,000. And there's a couple of lines I wanted to highlight. Also with us tonight is our Chief Assessor, Frank Green. And in a moment, I'll ask Frank to comment on one of the lines. There's a couple of key lines in the expense budget in this area. The first is the revaluation update. And what that's all about is each year the assessors are required by law to update the values on certain properties. And on occasion, they're required to use contractors for assistance with special properties, things of that nature. So that's really, that accounts for the bulk of that increase, and I'll ask Frank to comment on it. The other one is the tax bill. So within the assessor's budget is actually the line that, the tax bill line that you see there, it's increasing $2,000. That's for a slight increase in postage. So within this office is really, we really work together as the assessors and the treasurer collector. This line has the expense for mailing out all of the 4 quarterly the property tax bills for the printing and postage. So if Frank, if you could explain to the committee just the reason for the increase on the revaluation update line.
Certainly. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and FinCom. You can see that, as John indicated, the big changes in that $85,000 reval update from 85 to 91. The $6,000 was to hire our contractor. A couple of years ago, we were mandated to value public utilities, our 3 major public utilities, New England Power, Colonial Gas, and the power company, that their personal property in a kind of a more updated fashion to include our net book value, which historically is how it's been valued by the DOR with mandate, and to couple that with a replacement cost new less depreciation. And that was a really following up on a case that was heard at the appeals, in which that was supported, that methodology was supported, then the DOR kind of picked it up and kind of mandated all municipalities the last 2-3 years to implement that new methodology for valuing them. The effect of that, personal property is roughly $200 million of valuation as part of our CIP. Of that $200 million, these 3 companies, the public utilities, make up $95 million. So very nearly half. So it's a substantial amount. The increase in the valuation going from one year to the next as a result of this methodology change was going from $66 million to, $68 million to $95 million. That was implemented for the first time last year. Had it not been for that 39% increase, our CIP only would have gone up maybe 1% or 2. But as a result of that, it actually went up 3 to 3.3, which in a year like last year was welcomed. So the cost of that is $2,000 per power company to come up with this methodology. So that's the $6,000. It'll be that way looking forward.
Thank you.
And then the last division that's included in the packet is our accounting office. And in the accounting office budget, you'll see personnel services is going up just over 13,000. That's for non-union, the non-union increase, steps for any eligible personnel. And then under the expense budget, you'll see it's increasing slightly. It's basically almost level funded. It's just going up slightly at $150. If you look at the accounting expense budget, most of the accounts are pretty minimal. It's things such as office supplies, staff development if someone had to take a course or something. But the two key accounts in there is the financial audit that you see. It's $46,500. That's staying level. We have a 3-year contract with the firm. And then the next, if you skip 2 rows down, the GASB actuarial update, that's the fee that we're required to pay. We're required to update the OPEB liability number in our financial statements each year. And that's the fee for the actuarial firm to perform that work. And so the expense budget, just like I said, it's just increasing $150 to $55,830. So that's the accounting office. And then the last page is just that I provided to you is just the salary detail for all the personnel within finance. And you have that. So that concludes the finance department.
Great. Does anybody have any questions?
Don, just real quick on the assessors. You mentioned the tax bill. I know it's going back a couple of years, but what caused the big drop and then the big spike back up to, like, it was 30,000 a couple of years ago, and then it's back to 40, and now we're 46.
I would have to look at that. I do remember we had an issue where we changed the bill printers, and I'd have to see. I believe they may have billed it. The timing of the billing may have come in a different fiscal year. But let's see, tax bills. The only thing I could think there is, we haven't had any big drop in postage, or we haven't had a significant decrease in the number of bills that we send out. Most likely it was due to a timing issue where for example, in late June, you're right near the fiscal year, the bill printer actually sends us an invoice for all of the bills, and for some of the work that's being done, for the bills that are going out, they have to go out right before the end of the month, and they're due August 1st. I believe at one time they were billing us for part of the work in one fiscal year, and then we would get the actual postage bill later on. And now I believe what they've been doing, they try to stay consistent. They're billing us all in the same fiscal year for that work.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none. Thank you very much for the information this evening. We all appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll hit stop sharing just so we take this down.
That'd be great. Thank you. And then next on our agenda, and forgive me, Regina, is the review of the fiscal year 22 budget veterans agent. Took finance department out of order, so I apologize for that.
Okay, glad to be here.
All right. I can share your document here. 1 second.
Okay, okay. So for the fiscal year 2022, it's basically a level funded budget. Not too much has changed. The goals and the mission of Veteran Services is pretty consistent and standard. And basically it is to reach out and to serve any Chelmsford veterans pretty much with anything that they need. But their primary mission is the Chapter 115 benefit program that is a state-run town collaborative to help veterans who may be in need of short-term temporary public assistance. So the Chapter 115 budget number is for fiscal year 2022 requesting $125,000, which is the same as this year. And it's really important to remember that the $125,000 requested, 75% of that will be returned to the town. And the way it's returned is they're 1 year out. So the next reimbursement, what we'll get is we will get the reimbursement for January, February, and March of 2020. We will get that the end of March 2021. So it's 1 year to reimburse the cities and towns. There's not a lot of changes in Veteran Services. This year was, just like everybody else, we had a few curveballs with the pandemic. The federal, the Chapter 115 numbers, the folks that we actually assist in the program was pretty steady. We didn't have a spike, which the state thought we might, probably because the unemployment for veterans who may have been eligible, came through. So if somebody was receiving unemployment, that would be more than the Chapter 115 would be able to help them with. So it didn't have a big uptick in the numbers. So it stays about 20, maybe 22 folks a month would get assistance from us. And the two big areas of increase were federal VA disability compensation claims. They really shot up, but they shot up actually pretty much statewide and pretty much nationwide. And the VA has recognized that. And one of the theories was that a lot of veterans were home and they finally thought, hey, I never put in a claim. Maybe I should put in a claim, which is fine, which is great. But it's just a lot more, they're a lot more involved to process them, et cetera. But they're really the important part of Veteran Services, because the VA disability compensation, that money is really, it's big. It's that's the important money that you want veterans in your community to be receiving. And I put in the under the notes that the last VA snapshot for benefits for 2020 show that the VA federal benefits that flow into Chelmsford to 539 veterans and or family members, widows, etc., was 13,800,000, which is, that's a lot of money. But okay, so the other big increase that we've seen in the last, just in the last few months, was the need to help folks with VA healthcare enrollment. And that's a direct result of the COVID vaccination, because the Bedford VA was one of the first VA centers to get the vaccination. And they opened it up, but in order to get the vaccination, the veteran had to be enrolled in the VA healthcare system, which is not a huge hurdle, but a lot of veterans are not enrolled because they don't use it or they didn't know they were eligible, etc. So that's been another big increase in folks. They just, they want to see if they're eligible to enroll. And not all veterans are eligible to enroll in the VA healthcare system. If you have a service-connected disability, you can enroll. And otherwise, there's a means test on enrollment, but it's not huge. And what happens is, once a veteran is retired, they usually are eligible to enroll because the means test is only based on income. It's not based on assets. So that was about it. We modified, of course, the Memorial Day, and we modified Veterans Day. We did have a service and ceremony. We didn't tell a lot of people. We pre-filmed both of them. And then we will do something appropriate for Memorial Day. Not exactly sure what, but we will do something appropriate.
Anybody have any questions? All right. Seeing none. Anita, thank you very much for coming this evening.
Can I just say one more thing? I just want to give you your heads up. So for this fiscal year 2020, of course, you know, with the pandemic and all the financial constraints, I just want to give you a heads up that in fiscal year 2023, I'm going to request a part-time admin position for the office. So I just wanted to put that out there for the next year.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly keep that in mind. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Next on our agenda this evening, we have a review of the fiscal year 22 budget for the library. With us this evening is Becky Herman, the library director. Hi, Becky. How are you?
I'm fine. I think my sound might be a little like I'm underwater. Can everyone hear me if I speak loudly? Is it good?
No, you're all set.
Good. It's intermittent sometimes. I was just thinking that usually I come and I bring the One Book Chelmsford book for you guys, and I just can't bring it virtually to you this way. So I just wanted to apologize for that, and I wanted to encourage you to come down to the library and pick up a copy. This year's One Book Chelmsford community-wide reading book is Cy Montgomery's How to Be a Good Creature, and it is a memoir that's told by about 13 different animals in her life that were important, and it's just a wonderful and heartwarming book that we thought we wanted to do something that was sort of filled more with hope when all of us are going through such difficult times, and we just thought if we could focus on something that taught us a little bit more about gratitude and forgiveness and empathy and how to be a better creature in the world, then and she's going to come and do a talk for us on April 21st at 7 p.m. and she's been described as a combination of Emily Dickinson and Indiana Jones. So she's a science and nature writer, and she does a column for the Globe, and she's on NPR all the time. So she's a wonderful speaker. So I just wanted to put in a plug for her for that. But yeah, so as far as the library is concerned, probably the most interesting page for you to look at would be the budget page, and then maybe I can just talk over it with the numbers.
Sure. Would you like the budget page itself or the comments? I have.
I think the budget page itself would be good. I have the comments in front of me.
Okay,
So,
certainly. One second, please.
and thank you for sharing it for me.
Not a problem.
It's been a challenging year for us, obviously. I mean, for everyone, and you know, we've just really been fortunate, I think, to have the town be so supportive of us as far as making the patrons and the staff feel safe. You know, whether it's the plexiglass that you know was installed, or the additional cleaning protocols that we were able to put in place, and all the different PPE, the equipment, and the masks and everything. It's just been really helpful, because I listened. I have obviously connections with lots of different communities and different libraries, and we have really been very progressive in getting our library open, and it's really been because we've had so much support, I think, on the town side. So as far as the budget is concerned, the town manager had asked us to present a level service budget. So there are no increases in services. The increases really are just reflected because there are salary increases that are associated with step raises or negotiated union contract, or then there's sometimes have been increases because of utilities or other maintenance contracts that we have. So the increase is a 3.89% increase. And the other thing I just wanted to remind people of is, unlike other municipal departments, we do have some other requirements we have to meet for the state. So one of those things is that we have to maintain a budget that's the average of the last 3 years' budgets plus 2.5%. And we've been able to do that reliably since about 2008 when we had to request a waiver. But thankfully, we've been able to keep the budget at that level, and the benefit of that is that when we are funded at a state aid level, then we get an additional $40,000 to $50,000 a year that the state gives us that we can use for any library purpose. And over the years, it's been for everything from Saturday hours to helping with the Scaboria Park that we built next to the library, and many other things. We also have to make sure that we maintain a library budget, a book budget that's 13% of our total, and we meet that requirement from the library's budget, but also from Friends of the Library donations and from gift book money too. So we also have to be open a minimum amount of hours, and of course that's been a challenge this year because we were actually closed to the public March, April, and May. But the town, the state, the Board of Library Commissioners has relaxed those standards a little because they realized they're unrealistic because so many libraries had to reduce their hours. But we actually have been able to meet our minimum of 59 hours pretty reliably, and we have been meeting that since July when we reopened. And then we also have to employ a certified library director, which that would be me. So. The personnel budget is an increase of $54,839, which is a 3.8% increase. And the factors that you need to think about when we're considering that is that we actually had, as John was mentioning in his personnel, we have several longevity increases. So we have 2 more staffers who are now at the 20-year mark. That would be me. It's my 20-year anniversary on March 27th. And then my assistant director, Vicki. And then we have 4 who are at the 15-year mark. We continue to have really great retention of staff and people who've worked there for many, many years. The personnel budget thing also to consider is we also increase a small amount of each year until we get the pages up to that state minimum wage increase. And so that changes every January, has been for the last couple of years. The personnel budget also includes things in the library, like the union has an evening shift differential. We have the restoration of the Sunday hours, which we're crossing our fingers that come October that we're going to be able to be open on Sundays too. And then we also have custodians that do the bulk of our big periodic maintenance, and they do that on weekends and on weekends during the summer a lot of the time. And so those are things like waxing the terrazzo floor and stripping floors, stripping bathroom floors, doing interior painting. And repairing of walls and things that we would have to hire out, but we instead use our custodians to do. There's also an additional addendum that refers to personnel, which is, I can talk about in a minute, but I don't want to talk about it as part of this overall budget. So the general expenses increase is a little bit higher, a little bit more of an anomaly in that it's a 10% increase. And it's actually very specific to the pandemic planning that we've had to do. And what we had to do was work with our FMC, the company, to reprogram our HVAC system, and then with the mechanical engineers that come and service our system too. And we reprogrammed it so that it could run more frequently. And this allows an increased airflow and more frequent outside air exchanges. And then we also changed all of the filters out to what they call the MERV 13, and those resulted in an increase in our gas and our electricity costs. And I've been concerned about this, and I got in touch with Melissa Joyce, who's the energy manager for the town, and I talked to Kathleen, and we're seeing this, I guess, in the schools too, and it's a function of the fact that we're running the system all the time so that we can be safe, and so it's an expense that we're willing to bear at this point because we just want to make sure that the building itself is the safest that it can be for the patrons that come in the door. And we have between 300 and 400 people a day now that are starting to come. And so we just wanted to, for the staff and for the public, we want to just make sure that we're refreshing that air as often as we can. So there is a increase there, and then also an increase that's related to the fact that because we're making frequent changes and having to do other programming, and things are just more sophisticated, than it was recommended by Melissa Joyce and by Kathleen that maybe we would look at having an ongoing contract with FMC so that we don't just pay each time that we have an event that we need them to help us with. So that's part of that 10% increase. And then our materials budget is increased by just 2,000. That helps us meet that state requirement that I referred to. And then also we're doing some additional collection development that has to do with our pop-up mobile library, which is going on the road. We did a little trial run in the fall, but COVID kind of, derailed us for a little while. But we're going to go out. We have a whole schedule that we put together. And we're going to start doing that in April 1st. And so we have a little bit of a materials budget increase that relates to that. And I just wanted to just reemphasize that we use a lot of money every year from gift book donations. We get an average of $7,000 to $8,000 a year. Sometimes as much as 10,000 that are just from people. People give in memory of somebody. People give a donation because they're honoring somebody for a birthday. People give when somebody retires. I mean, so it's fun to see the kinds of things that people, mark the occasion. I mean, and it's an honor for us when people choose the library when one of their loved ones passes away. But we use about 7,000 of that goes towards that materials budget that we need to meet. I also wanted to just give a shout out to the Friends of the Library group, because even during the pandemic, they have been extremely innovative. They offered several parking lot library sales to, outdoors, where they sorted books and had them like mystery bags by category. Despite the fact that they couldn't have their April and their September sales, they really are able to continuously raise money in these innovative ways of these little tiny sales, and then the book cart that they have in the library that it raises an amazing amount of money. They have a healthy bank balance because they've been so good at that fundraising over the years. And so when we came to them with our request list for this year, we have a wish list. They didn't have any problem funding it as they usually do. And they give us, each year they fund about $30,000 worth of wish list items, which includes the museum passes that everybody gets to check out. Of course, this year, not so much, but the state beach park one was used a lot that last year. So if you don't know about that, you might want to try it. But they help us with library programs and with our one book program and then other large items. So besides the volunteers of the Friends, we had 226 volunteers who worked for us over 5,000 hours, almost 5,500 hours. And that's despite the fact that we were closed March, April, and May. And then we actually didn't have volunteer help in June, and we've actually really not had much in the way of, of help moving ahead. But so the numbers will look quite different next year. But I just think that's amazing that we still had, over 5,500 hours of people giving their time to us and dedicating their services to the library. So I guess in summary, I just want to say that, we're really grateful that the town showed its support, as I said, with the safety stuff that we did with the municipality, but the town itself, the people have been showing up for our online programs in droves. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at the sort of fun. There's another slide. I don't know if you can get to, but it's hard to see on a little tiny screen for people from home. But we had done a little graphic where we just were looking at the amount of programs, our virtual programs that we had, just for in fiscal year last year, we had 95 online programs, and we had over 4,200 people that came to those programs, which averaged like 44 people per program. And this was before we even really got going with our virtual programming. We're doing amazing things, and we're working with collaboratives with other towns. And so we're able to get really big authors that we wouldn't have ever been able to afford, but we're banding together and doing these wonderful programs that people who have not been able to attend our programs because it's been dark or it's been late or because they have small children, they're able to actually come to the library virtually. And so it's something we're going to make sure that we continue to do even when we're allowed to meet in person. So I think we're doing really well despite all the challenges that we've had. And I think the only other thing that I might do, does anyone have any questions about that? I can address the supplemental COVID cleaning request too. But basically, I'll just quickly say that is that the supplemental cleaning request I put in there before we were notified the government was going to approve another reallocation of COVID money to towns and cities. So I believe, and Paul can, confirm this or not, but I believe that any additional cleaning that protocols that we're following and where we need extra staffing to fulfill them, we had been using the COVID money from the federal government to fund those to begin with. And since we have a new allocation of that, then that's the way that would be funded rather than my supplemental request. But I just wanted to give people an idea of the dollar figure on what we were doing in order to accommodate the recommendations that the CDC gave us. So that's a lot of talking from me. Is there any questions?
I have two that are related on the utility topic. Do you have any sense then, given the fiscal year 21 budget amount, how much you'll be over by the time we get to the end of June?
But right now we're up about 20% over for what our regular budget is. So so if I'm looking at the right now, so our request for and I'm sorry, I should have that figure in front of you, and I don't want to talk off erroneously. So if it's better for you, I would rather just actually send you the actuals.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I'll send that to committee and so that you can see how it's running. Because I would like somebody else to take a look at it anyways, because it's astounding to me the difference. And I just, I'm doing it from projections, but I'll be happy to share those numbers with you so that we can kind of fine tune it if we can in any way.
Okay, thank you. And then the second part on the same topic is when you were looking at the fiscal 22 number for 50,000, I think it was, is that assuming that the kind of the full bore running all the time continues for the full year, or is that
Right.
going to hopefully ration off once we get towards the end of the calendar year and vaccines and herd immunity and all that stuff?
Well, it was assuming for about 3/4 of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we also just, at the time that I submitted this budget, I hadn't gotten the ASHRAE recommendations hadn't come out, and those just were changed about 2 weeks ago. And what they're doing is they're recommending that instead of running continuously, that you do a purge of your system every morning. And so I'm working with the FFNC to find out whether or not our system can actually accommodate that. And then I would be able to adjust numbers based on that if it made sense and if it felt like it was still the safest option for us to do.
Okay, thank you.
Becky, is this the graphic you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, well, just I thought it was sort of funny. I mean, not funny, but how many we had all these people who are learning a new hobby. We have this thing called Creative Bug, and so it's like a Joann's fabric. It's not commercial, but I mean, if you go in, you can learn any kind, how to paint, how to draw, how to make stuffed animals, and that So we had over 2,000 people using that, theoretically to learn a new hobby. We had. The online library card signups are talking about that's just through June, but those have continued to increase. I'm copied on those every time, so we're probably getting 15 or 20 library card signups a week. Because people are just interested. Our online, the virtual, the streaming services have all those numbers are like crazy. They've gone way up. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, we're trying, what is it? You make, what's that expression? You make hay, turn star into gold. Maybe that's what I mean.
That's incredible.
It's,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it's not the way we wanted to have this happen. I meant, but on the other hand, I think, when things turn around, maybe there's going to be a whole new crop of people that are going to become our in-person users too, because they realize all the things that we're able to do. So it's very gratifying, to have people. And then when we finally opened the doors and let a lot of people to come in and actually look at the books, people were just like, they couldn't believe that they could actually just walk around in the library. So that was really wonderful. And then we have a whole crew of people that have just loved curbside, and that's never going to go away either. That's a service that we had been trying to initiate before COVID even happened. We had been actually trying to figure out how we would staff it and maintain it. And we've just, the system we have is working, and we're going to continue to do that so that when you're you're your mom, you know, your mom or dad, and you're driving up and you get your kids in the car and one of them's taking a nap, and you don't want to get them out of the car, you can just call us up and we can just bring the stuff out. So we're happy to curate for people too. If you just say, I feel like this kind of book, or I feel like this kind of movie, we'll give you 10, you know, we'll be happy to give you suggestions.
Excellent. All right. Any other questions?
No questions, just a huge thank you. All of your efforts and all of the special events that you've done are a huge, huge benefit to the community. Thanks for all of you, everything that you and your team have done.
Exactly. My staff is the big one. You know, I mean, they've just been creative and patient, and, you know, they're nervous and they're scared, and we're dealing with the public all the time. And we wish our vaccine had been at the same time, even as the teachers, but we're not even considered by the state library workers. So that's been really a frustration, but they, you know, they're doing the best, and we're serving people the best that we can. So thank you for the compliment.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Becky. Appreciate you coming this evening.
All right. Thank you.
Next on our agenda this evening is a review of warrant article 28 regarding the climate change resolution. With us this evening is Mr. Basicki, who's with the Chelmsford Climate Action Team. Let me just pull up your presentation. You're actually muted right now.
Are you going to show the presentation I sent you?
Yes, I'll put up your presentation. 1 second, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, while this is getting going, I just want to say, while the library director is here, that our group has used the library extensively over the past year and a half, and it's a great town resource. I wanted to make sure that I recognize that while Becky was still on the screen here. Thanks very much. Your staff has been very, very good, and we couldn't have gotten where we are without them.
Thank you very much.
If you don't have it, I've got my own here.
I do have it. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
It's just thinking.
Okay, thank you. So our group was formed maybe a year and a half ago, and as I mentioned, that we've been using the library for a lot of events. We have had state reps, state senator meetings that are public, and we also formed this Chelmsford Climate Resolution, which I'm going to describe tonight. Next slide, please. So this is the language. I'm not going to go over the language that's in the town article. I just want to focus your attention on the bolded sentence at the bottom, at the start of the last paragraph. Be it resolved that the select board will charge a committee with studying and making recommendations for specific strategies and actions for Chelmsford to achieve the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Next slide, please. That's the actionable part of the resolution as far as the town meeting is concerned. So I mentioned net zero emissions by 2050. Some of you may have heard of this. Some of you, it hasn't been very high profile in the news, but there's been a lot of climate research. I'm sure you've heard of some of it, that climate change is driven by human-produced greenhouse gases, and it's a serious threat. And there was a report in 2018 by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that that the world needs to have net zero emissions by 2050 to escape the worst effects of climate change. So now Massachusetts this year, or the past year, about a year ago, has committed to a 30-year transition to net zero for the state. And there's a state 2050 decarbonization roadmap plan. And going beyond this, there's also a plan for what to do in the next 10 years up until 2030. And that work will be, that plan will be finalized, I think, in the next couple of months. So for everyone in the audience, net zero can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but it means basically reducing carbon producing emissions to a very low level by 2050, and then offsetting the small remainder using carbon offsets. So the climate resolution is Article 28, and that resolution mirrors our state goal for the town. And what it says is the Chelmsford will take steps toward net zero emissions by 2050. And the resolution actually calls for the appointment of a committee to study and make recommendations. And then I should point out that Chelmsford is not alone in this. A number of towns around Massachusetts have similar resolutions. Next slide, please. Well, this just, the only reason for this chart is to show that there is a plan that the state, this is from a state website. This is the cover sheet of the state decarbonization plan roadmap. Next slide, please. So why does Chelmsford need to go to net zero if the Massachusetts already has a goal? Why don't we just let the state do it and we can sort of sit back? Next slide. Well, the reason is that if Massachusetts is going to get to net zero, all the towns and cities also need to have the same goal. It's kind of obvious. Next slide, please. So the state is going to use incentives to reach its goal, the state goal. And towns, so we're proposing that towns with well-established climate plans will be best able to respond to these incentives. You can imagine if two people came to you for proposing for a grant, and one had a good plan and one didn't, you would naturally choose the one with a better plan. I think that that's pretty obvious. Now, I should say that Chelmsford has a very good history in responding to green programs of the state, and we've benefited greatly by programs over the past dozen years or so. There's, I won't read that next line, but you can read it for yourself. There's been a lot of actions that Chelmsford has taken over the years, and the other reason for us to have a plan and to be a part of this movement is that we can join with other towns and resolutions and have greater influence on the state as a coalition versus by ourselves. Next slide, please. Now the resolution talks about a climate committee, asks a climate committee to be established. And this committee would be long-term and spanning over a large amount of times, many select boards and town managers. The tasks that it asks the committee to do would be to assess where we are, what is our greenhouse gas emissions in Chelmsford. And there are various tools that have been developed by the Metropolitan District Commission, and we would propose to use those tools if this goes forward. Secondly, the committee would develop a plan for Chelmsford to reach its goal, and part of its goal would be to educate town and citizens of emerging plans and opportunities, and to make yearly recommendations to the town for reducing carbon carbon use. And now this goes beyond really what the resolution says, but I'll just let you know what other experience of other towns has been. Starting with a volunteer committee has worked well in other towns. Diverse membership is very important, to have a wide range of people, backgrounds on this committee, and no funds are requested. We aren't requesting any funds in this resolution. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So here's a summary. The Mass State program is already underway, and we think that, I can't be sure about this, but I think that we'll be starting to see actions taken over the next couple of years, where the state is trying to influence this march toward net zero. So the reason for the net zero resolution for Chelmsford is to, first of all, help prepare Chelmsford to compete for these incentives, to allow us to group together with other climate towns, to provide feedback to the state, educate the residents, and give advice to the town on actions that the town can take to reduce its carbon use. And again, this is a volunteer-driven committee, no cost to the town. Finally, science has shown again that humans are causing climate change. We know how to address it. Climate change is a serious threat, and the climate resolution sets our town on the same path as the state and I should point out much of the rest of the world. Although Massachusetts is a leader in the US, the rest of the world is already on this path. It sets the town on a path to a transition to the future. And for that, after that, that's my end. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Have any questions?
Yeah, I have a few.
Yeah.
So when the state passed the Global Warming Solutions Act back in 2008, the target was to have a 25% reduction based on the 1990 baseline by 2020. As of 2018, the most recent available year, we were at just over 22% for the state. Do you know the specific statistics for Chelmsford?
The way that the number is counted is strange. It takes 2 years to find out what the answer is. So we won't know the answer for 2020 until 2022. But the executive secretary of EEA says that we're on track. Although I will have to say that it looks that we're not there yet. We're not there yet. The last I knew, we were like at 22%.
So the state has often been kind of noted as being a leader, one of the early adopters for this topic, trying to address greenhouse gas emissions. Is the need to have this committee at the local level? And I think you touched on this, but it seems like collectively we seem to be at the kind of the front edge of this. Do we really? Is this because you don't think Chelmsford's doing enough now? We need to do more.
I think that all the cities and towns are going to have to participate in order for the state to meet its goal, because we are where the boots on the ground are. The folks in the state house are not going to be able to do this by themselves.
So folks may know that Chelmsford had already been designated as a green community by the Green Communities Division of the Department of Energy Resources. We've received over $1 million in grants from the division so far. I could find nothing on the state's website, either the Green Community Division or the Department of Energy Resources, that recommended, endorsed, or even mentioned a municipality forming a climate change committee. It talks about forming an energy committee, which we have. The mission of that committee, which already exists, is the Energy Conservation Committee, will assist the town with identifying, designing, and implementing programs and projects for energy conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy generation. Can't this committee address anything that already would fall under the climate change without having to form a brand new committee?
I didn't say that it had to be a brand new committee. Maybe you could recharge the Energy Committee with new goals. The Energy Committee has done a lot of good work. I don't know what their current work is right now. They've been less active in the last year. The town sustainability manager actually would like to do a lot of the things that are on this chart, but hasn't got the time. She's just a part-time sustainability manager, as you know. It really needs, what I'm saying here basically is that there has to be more people paying attention to it than we have had in the past.
So I guess my last comment is that, it seems like a direct connection that the Energy Conservation Committee would be right on topic for this. But if I think about the broader issue of things that impact, environmental issues, I would expand that to include the Capital Planning Committee, the Permanent Building Committee. We have a Recycling Committee. We have a Tree Committee, even the Planning Board, the Select Board, and even us, the Finance Committee. As you mentioned, we have a Sustainability Manager. It seems like we've got enough resources already without having a need to create a new committee just for the sole purpose to talk about and look at climate change. And thank you.
But there may well be enough people, in town. We have over 500 volunteers in town, if you count the town meeting reps. What this asks for is a focus by a given committee on this topic, as opposed to having it scattered throughout all of the town, the other town committees.
I have a,
Kathy, you're muted.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your effort. I have a couple of questions in general. First of all, who would you be giving the recommendation to? Would there be like an annual presentation to town meeting?
Yeah.
Would this committee be established, supposing by the Board of Selectmen? And did you indicate how many members on the committee? Did you lay out details like that?
There's no recommendation on the amount of members on the committee. We assumed that the select board would be the one who would be making the decision to go ahead or not for this. And I'm sorry, what was the last question you asked?
I think like who you'd be making presentations to after you, so you have your committee and you've come up with some.
Could you go back to the resolution chart, please, Jim?
Yeah, one second.
The first chart.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. So if you read the rest of that paragraph,
Select Board.
some of that may be answered. We will report findings and recommendations to the select board annually, and will also provide an assessment of Chelmsford's progress. I shouldn't say we, I'm not on the committee, but toward net zero emissions to the select board every 5 years.
So I really appreciate this, and I think that it could behoove us to establish a committee in the hopes that the state would offer some sort of grants or something for towns who are directly focusing on this topic. Do you foresee that happening in the future? Because I know you mentioned Pepperell and Westford and some other community somewhere in your presentation.
Yeah. There's, I would say, I'm guessing now because there's no list, I'm guessing maybe 10% of the towns in Massachusetts have this roughly the same kind of committee. I think the state is going to have to make some incentives for the residents and also the towns to be able to meet the goal of net zero for the entire state. I heard on, I think, either an earlier finance committee meeting or some other meeting that we could not, that the town was not able to use the incentives for electric vehicles, that was oriented toward residents or only, and not town members. But that's an example of the kind of thing that might be turned around in the future to allow the municipality itself to use EVs for its own operations, and also get incentives for it.
So I guess,
Thank you.
thanks, Kathy. So I guess I have a question. You're mentioning that there's no funding requested in this particular article, but is there plans potentially in the future that there would be a need for funding for, say, doing the assessment of the Chelmsford greenhouse gas emissions, or putting together plans or education tools or things of that nature? Or is there a hope that there'd be, as it was mentioned earlier, grants and funds that might become available to accomplish these goals?
I think that I've been talking to the one running the Arlington committee, and they're 2 or 3 years into it now. They've been able to do the first 2 steps on those tasks themselves, and the third, well, of course, the third one also. So I mean, it's possible that there might become a time when you would get a professional consultant to help at the committee. But their experience has been they've been able to carry out for a couple of years without one.
Okay. Thank you.
I actually have one more question. In your organization of your committee, and this actually somewhat circles back to Eric's point in that Chelmsford does we have a very active volunteer group. We have numerous committees and functions within the town that are, I think, green thinking, environmentally thinking, cost reduction thinking. And I don't know if your committee might think about having liaisons or some sort of communication path to these other groups or meetings, so that there is a semi-focused approach, or a, not a duplication of efforts, I guess. I mean, like, how do you plan on communicating with other groups, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, well, let's see. You're talking to me as though I'm on the committee right now. I don't know that will be the case. I'll
Okay.
volunteer, but maybe there's someone that'll do a lot better job than I would. So let me just give you my personal view. I think that those are very good ideas. Climate, the energy and climate cut across all committees, so that there has to be some connection, and it can't be freestanding. And I'm not sure how that would be done, but I think that it should be done. I agree with you 100% on that.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Kazicki, for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bear with me while I back out of this presentation. There we go. Okay, next on our agenda this evening, we have a review of the 5 zoning, or initial review of the 5 zoning bylaw amendment articles, articles 37 through 41, dealing with various items up from the planning board. The first of which is review of Article 37, the zoning bylaw amendment for the village center overlay parking requirements. Let me just pull up presentation art on this. Okay, and with us this evening, I believe we have at least one member of the planning board, and also we have Evan Blansky with us as well. Hi, Evan, how are you doing this evening?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I do believe that planning board member Nancy Arroway and Mike Raisbeck are with us tonight. on behalf of the planning board. So just by way of background, the planning board started this process back in December 9th of 2020, where they identified these zoning articles. And on January 20th, they held a work session, and that was essentially the board's deep dive to wordsmith a draft that was prepared. On January 27th, the public hearing was opened. That was continued to February 10th, at which time between January 27th and February 10th, all town meeting reps were provided direct email notification to attend and participate in the February 10th public hearing, which a number did. Public hearing was then continued to February 24th. At March 10th, the planning board tabled the public hearing, and they are scheduled to reconvene the public hearing on March 24th. So I just wanted to provide that as background for you. So the first zoning article, 37, relates to Center Village parking. This article would propose to revise both the underlying Center Village zoning district as well as the Village Center overlay district as it pertains to parking provisions. It looks to increase parking for uses, all commercial, industrial, non-residential uses within the Village Center district by decreasing the existing by right 50% reduction down to a 20% reduction, and also by providing a special permit where the planning board may consider a total parking reduction up to 50%. This article was spurred by the planning board's concern about providing adequate parking within the center, not only for existing uses in current time, but particularly about moving forward into the future. I should be noted that expansions of existing uses as well as new uses would be subject to the new parking ratio provision. Final note on this article is that the Center Village Master Planning Committee, which is chaired by Mike Rigney, has voted to endorse and recommend this zoning article.
Any questions? Pretty straightforward. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the Article 38 regarding.
I'm sorry, I had a question. It took
Oh,
me a while
sorry.
to unmute.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, not being a planning board linguist, I just want to ask a couple of questions. What does the phrase by right actually mean? You use that like decreases by right 50% reduction. I don't know what that means.
That's a good question. It's a legal term within the zoning arena. By right means that there is no discretion consideration on behalf of the planning board. A special permit by definition allows the planning board discretion in making its decision.
So
Kathy,
walk me through a scenario. So I'm a business in downtown Chelmsford, and I have 5 parking spaces out front. What does decreases by right by 50% mean to me as a business owner?
Another good question. So this article only pertains to private parking, not on-street or municipal parking. So if a private business is required to have, let's say, 10 parking spaces within the center village, they're currently allowed a by right 50% reduction, which means that they would legally be required to provide 5 off-street parking spaces.
So in a way, what is happening is you're actually reducing your so I have a restaurant And right now, because I have a restaurant with X number of seats, I'm required to have Y parking spaces. What you're saying is this is decreasing my requirement?
This is increasing the requirement. You're currently required to have 50% of the typical requirement. This is increasing it to 80%.
Okay,
Yeah, I think where you're seeing the red herring, Kathy, is the language in the bullet saying decreases by right 50% down to 20%, where it's the requirement is changing. So you have to have 80% as opposed to 50% by right, and you can get a permit to go down to 50.
These are good questions because it helps me refine the presentation.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I would, I have the same question, Kathy, so thank you for asking those. And I'm glad that, you know, Evan, I definitely think like clarifying that, like going down to 20 is actually meaning it's going up to 80% will
Exactly.
go a long way. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks, Kathy.
and just so everybody knows, we'll have these back next week when we have our meeting, because these have not been voted on. The public hearing hasn't closed, and these have not been voted on by the planning board. And so this is sort of a test run for us too. So we can get any questions we may have in here and follow up with any additional questions next week. Given that there are 5 zoning articles in this town meeting, we want to make sure that we have a adequate time to understand both the concerns of the planning board, the votes that they've made, and any questions we might have in the interim.
Jim, could I add something, please?
Certainly.
This is Nancy, and I just wanted to add that this change only affects new construction. It has absolutely no impact on existing businesses that are not making changes.
So in other words, so it's only triggered by new construction or changes that would trigger a change in their requirements.
That's right. A change that would trigger an increase in requirements.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, then no more questions on this article. I'll go on to Article 38 for e-commerce.
Okay, so this article is a result. Its genesis is from the draft 2020 master plan update, and this committee, chaired by George Zaharoulis, of which also Nan and Mike from the planning board are on the 2020 master plan update committee, has identified e-commerce as an emerging trend pre-COVID, accelerated during COVID, and likely to continue to accelerate post-COVID. In essence, the e-commerce article provides additional opportunities to existing and new businesses to adapt to the rapidly changing consumer and market conditions. It's important to note that e-commerce is very likely ongoing to some degree and extent. What this article is talking about is not what you refer to as e-commerce when you're in Chelmsford. It is referring to the business that's providing the e-commerce service to the consumer. So as part of this, this article is proposing to define new uses and designate zoning districts where these uses would be permissible. Our existing definition of retail likely already permits e-commerce, again, to some degree and extent. These definitions provide clarity and removes any confusion by creating specific definitions. It also provides clear distinction between existing uses, such as a transport terminal, which is what UPS is. They carry freight that's already boxed, as well as a warehouse distribution facility. So e-commerce, for purposes of zoning in Chelmsford, is neither of those, and we're creating a new definition and thereby creating a new use category. So the first step in this was to revise the existing definition for retail to clarify the difference between traditional retail and e-commerce. Second is to specifically define what e-commerce is. And at a high level, it's internet sales that involve business to business as well as business to consumer. The first new use to be defined is a fulfillment center. This is essentially a last mile bulk product warehousing and direct fulfillment. That's the key word, bulk product warehousing and direct fulfillment. Fulfillment centers are classified as a principal use. That is a use where the only thing taking place is a fulfillment center. And then the second type of fulfillment center is a co-located facility, whereby it would serve as an accessory use to a traditional retail use, as long as it was under 30% of the total gross square feet. Next item to note is not to be confused, again, with existing uses such as transport terminal or warehouse. The next use to be defined is a dark store. A dark store is essentially a micro fulfillment center. It's a retail use. It's not open to the public, that is conducting fulfillment and no larger than 10,000 square feet. So what you can see here is, as far as fulfillment, is big fulfillment, accessory co-located fulfillment, and then micro fulfillment via a dark store. The final definition is a ghost kitchen. This is a commercial kitchen, not open to the public, meaning there's no indoor dining areas. They specialize in made to order and catered meals, and it may provide customer pickup. Next slide, please. So what I normally try to do as part of presenting zoning articles is provide some visual examples. So the top row are visual examples of fulfillment centers. These are full scale, again, bulk storage and warehousing. As you can see, it's characterized by floor to ceiling racks with employees picking the product from the floor. The slide on the right is an example of either co-location. I think co-location where a front of a store is traditional retail and a back of a store is a co-located fulfillment center. It also could be used as an example of an existing traditional retail store completely converting their retail square footage to fulfillment, a fulfillment center. The middle row is examples of co-located micro fulfillment centers. First picture on the left is a fairly intensive micro fulfillment center. It has racks, it has conveyors. The middle two slides are very likely what a co-located fulfillment center would look like in Chelmsford small, locally owned and operated businesses, where they have a dedicated portion of the back of the house for bulk storage and packaging. The final slide in the middle is an example of an existing small business that not only provided back of the store fulfillment, but also did their own delivery services. Either they own the vans or they contract for delivery directly from their retail location. The bottom row is examples of dark stores. Most common dark store in the industry at this point is in the food industry, the supermarket industry. That's the picture on the left. Second picture from the left is an example of what is likely a beverage liquor store type of operation. The last two visuals are examples again of the most prominent dark store operator, which is Amazon. This is in a traditional retail center. The last visual example on the bottom right shows examples of that type of facility providing delivery either with private contractors or customer pickup. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, we've presented the definitions, and then the second step of the exercise is to propose within what zoning districts these new uses should be permissible. So for purposes, the chart on the left relates to dark stores and ghost kitchens. And CA is neighborhood commercial. Neighborhood commercial is located across from the Westlands neighborhood along Chelmsford Street. There's also several small CA neighborhood zoning districts in South Chelmsford. As the chart indicates, planning board is proposing that dark stores be permitted by special permit and ghost kitchens be prohibited in neighborhood commercial. Do you want me to go through these in detail?
Can you repeat? Can you just, sorry, Jim, can you just repeat what you just said about the colors? What was what? I'm sorry, I was trying to get my head around what was what.
Yeah, so if you can blow that up, Jim.
I can certainly attempt to. Give me 1 second here. I'll have to exit the presentation mode.
So while Jim's doing that, so CA is so I've already covered CA. CB is roadside commercial. That is portions of Tingsboro Road, Middlesex Street, Littleton Road, Princeton, and Drum Hill. CC is shopping center. That's the Noble Plaza in Center Village. It's also portions of Chelmsford Street and portions of Drum Hill. CD is general commercial. That is Vinyl Square, the dark pink, and some of the gateway roadways leading into Vinyl Square, as well as Chelmsford Street from 495 to approximately Fletcher Street. CV is Center Village, the underlying zoning district, and IA is limited industrial. So what the planning board is proposing, again, for dark stores and ghost kitchens, by right in the shopping center zoning district and by right in the limited industrial zoning district. I should also mention that by right would likely trigger a site plan approval by the planning board, which normally triggers a public hearing as well as a butter notification within 300 feet. The chart on the right side speaks to fulfillment centers. As proposed, the planning board is proposing allowing principal use only in the IA zoning district by right, and accessory in the CB roadside commercial, CC shopping center zoning district. The CD accessory use, the N is highlighted, as that is one of the few remaining items that the planning board is still actively deliberating. They've bounced back and forth a little bit. They've received some direct feedback from the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee, which I believe Chairman Joe Tierney is on this call. And I believe that item will likely be resolved at the March 24th Planning Board public hearing.
Evan, can I ask a question? What was the reason that this has come up? Has like businesses been coming and asking for, like, is there an interest with
Good question. Yep.
someone is looking at spaces or something?
So this is as I mentioned, the 2020 master plan has identified this as a proactive zoning strategy. They acknowledge that the trend is progressing around us. It's not a new concept. There are communities all over Massachusetts that are either having these types of facilities proposed, or they're doing it proactively. In Chelmsford, I'm not aware of any specific interest. As I mentioned, there's likely many small, locally and operated businesses that are dabbling in e-commerce. As I mentioned, this would send a message to existing businesses that the town clearly is allowing this use and encouraging the use. And then as it pertains to any new opportunities, it does a couple things. One, again, it makes it clear that the town is amenable to certain types of uses in certain specific zoning districts. It also indicates to the marketplace that the community is amenable to these types of uses.
And what did you say about the fulfillment in the industrial uses? Like, my question, I guess I'm going with this is, there's certain retail, certain space in town, like the Mercury building that's on River Neck Road, right? Like, we have these industrial spots all throughout towns that are sometimes in neighborhoods. Would a fulfillment house, which would have a lot of traffic and trucks, be allowed there under this article?
Yeah, so the former Mercury site is located in the IA Limited Industrial Zoning District, as is the entire area of 129, portions of Technology Drive, up off of Drum Hill. So yes, the zoning as proposed would allow full-scale fulfillment centers by right with site plan approval from the planning board. I should indicate that while the one's initial reaction logically is related to traffic, couple things should be pointed out. One is that it's part of the planning board site plan approval process. Detailed traffic studies are required, and any increase in negative impacts related to traffic are required to be mitigated. The planning board has full jurisdiction and authority to require that. I should also mention that, per your example, which is a good one, there's 160,000 square feet of empty office buildings on that site. So part of the strategy, particularly for 129, is to provide other uses that the marketplace may have an interest in. And on the town side, as I've presented over the years, 129 has had a historical vacancy of a minimum of 500,000 square feet for over a decade. If the town wants to see these large office buildings filled or reused, the notion that the remaining large office buildings are going to be filled with traditional office type uses is fairly slim to none. So that's part of the zoning strategy. Again, to try to identify as many uses as possible that can be located appropriately, can be reviewed appropriately, that would allow the town to continue to reduce its vacancy while providing new kind of development opportunities.
And just another question, Lockheed Martin in Chelmsford, what zoning area is that? Just curious.
I believe that's also IA, right next to Maxwell's in the bike trail. Yes.
Okay, that's not my only concern is when we're thinking about planning, like you got to kind of think about what's zoned IA and what could go in there. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, these are good questions. So traditional fulfillment centers, and Amazon is the most prominent in the industry, range from 30,000 square feet to upwards of 1 million square feet. For purposes of Chelmsford, if there's an interest, they're likely going to target the Route 129 area because it has existing large buildings and properties that could either be retrofitted or demolished. Most importantly, it's within close highway proximity. So the notion that one of these full-scale facilities that we're all aware of is going to locate in South Chelmsford at the Lockheed Martin or up in North Chelmsford is highly unlikely for a large-scale facility.
Oh, I thought there was someone looking at the Mercury space, which is on River Neck Road.
Well, there is an entity looking at River Neck Road. They're looking at a variety of uses. They have not been specific with us.
So what might be beneficial, Evan, I do like visuals. They do help people visualize what's going on here, but I see generally, what they look like. I think people would be, and I know sometimes it's concern about confusion that these are actually businesses that are moving into town, but a couple of examples of the type of business that's associated with these, both fulfillment being the most obvious being Amazon, co-located fulfillment. Sometimes you think of Best Buy or things like that, or dark kitchens. You'll think of like Guy Fieri's Flavor Town, things like that. Those type of businesses, I think, would go a long way for people to generally understand what we're looking at that would go in those particular locations. And then the map itself, if it can be somehow, I know it's tough here in this setting to really get a good feel for it, but to really understand those locations that are targeted for each type of either fulfillment co-located or a dark store, dark retail / dark kitchen, just so people have a general idea of the type of business, and then the better picture of where the location might be, I think would go a long way towards understanding. Because I do know the trend is, especially with dark kitchens, is not going away. It's increasing significantly because they're trending more towards that delivery service. It creates lower overhead. There's a lot of co-location for these kitchens, and it's allowing for that new industry to kind of breathe life into. At least this past year.
I just have a question and I guess a suggestion, and I'll flip the order. I guess to echo Jim's point, I think, or I hope that most people will understand what you're talking about. So then obviously the next most important question is, what does that mean to me? So I was going to suggest, Jim beat me to it, but if you could even carve that map up into 2 or 3 different sections, people actually can see like, what these zones mean to them, because I was really struggling even when he was trying to blow it up to follow the map. And then the question, when you started, like we're adding this as new language to clarify or elaborate or better define what's allowed, which to me means it may have been allowed already. We're just making it clear. Is that the case?
So what you're picking up on is that an attorney or a proponent could make an argument that fulfillment centers, dark stores, ghost kitchens are already permissible under zoning to some extent.
Yeah, they're not prohibited.
What we don't want to happen is we don't want to be in a situation where a proponent comes to town hall and there's a gray area.
Yep.
Under zoning and the town's economic development strategy, similar to fast casual drive-throughs in 129, we want our zoning to be as crystal clear as possible where the town intends to promote a particular use. So we don't want to be stuck in a situation where the zoning commissioner determines that a use is permitted, it gets into a public hearing, and then aggrieved parties challenge it. We want to create a welcoming, business-friendly environment where the town deems it appropriate.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Evan. We'll hop right along. Our next article is Article 39 regarding non-medical marijuana.
Okay, so this article starts with the baseline that current zoning already permits medical treatment facilities and prohibits all non-medical uses. So what we're talking about tonight is non-medical uses, specifically the accessory or supportive uses. The article continues the prohibition on retail sales. So again, what we're talking about is the 7 accessory supportive uses that are defined by the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. These include a cultivator, which by state law can be both indoor and outdoor, and they specifically define and regulate characteristics associated with that. A cooperative can cultivate, obtain, manufacture, process, package, brand, and transfer. The manufacturer can process and package. Next one is a micro business. It can either be a cultivator or a manufacturer or both. A testing facility it does certifications as well as testing. A transporter and store, sale and distribution to retailers. And the final accessory use is a research facility, which can cultivate, purchase, acquire, and research. Under the state cannabis control statute, all uses require the select board to negotiate and vote on a host community agreement. In addition, all of these uses are heavily state regulated with state approvals and licenses. And what is being proposed at the local level for zoning purposes are special permits from the planning board wherever any of these uses are proposed to be permissible. Other issues that can be regulated within the Board of Selectmen, Select Board process and the zoning board process. The Board of Selectmen would be responsible for negotiating a community impact fee. State law allows for up to a 3% of gross annual sales to go towards local revenue. Security, odors and nuisances, traffic, and diversion to minors are some of the kind of high-level, prominent issues that local communities are able to get involved in as well as regulate. So security would involve the Chelmsford Police Department, Fire Department, first responders to review and provide comment to the planning board. Odors and nuisances, the planning board would look to the Board of Health. Traffic would be the police department and DPW. And all of these issues, again, under a special permit, the planning board has a legal discretion when they're making a decision to grant or not to grant. They also have the ability to hire third-party consultants to assist them if they deem necessary. Next slide, please.
Evan, just real quick, sorry, if I may, on the community host agreement, is that like a one-time kind of overarching thing that the select board says, you know, yes, we will allow this, or is it a case-by-case, application by application?
It's case by case.
Okay.
And that's one of the first steps in the process. In order for an entity to get their approvals at the state level, the state requires some level of indication from the local community that they're conceptually amenable. And then the host community agreement is
to Eric?
Yeah, and Anita, can he finish speaking first?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank
The
you.
host community agreement is a formal legal document that would summarize the select board negotiations with the proponent.
All right.
Can you just walk through the steps? Like, is it first the planning board or is it first the select board has to do the host agreement, then it goes to the planning? Like who goes first? And then it
So there
goes to
is-
this, like, I just kind of,
Good question. So there is no defined first step. What is required is that prior to the proponent submitting for their state approvals, that they provide some level of indication that the local community is either not opposed or supportive. So the clearest path would be to go to the planning board and be granted a special permit. But a proponent may find it more amenable or beneficial to go to the Board of Selectmen first. Now, either board, whether they start with the planning board or start with the select board, because this is it's not a traditional land use, those two boards could decide to hold joint meetings or collaborate much closer than they ordinarily would with a typical, zoning process. And as I mentioned, there's a variety of other town department heads, subject matter experts that would likely be heavily relied on in order for each board to make an informed decision.
do you need both boards before the state will approve, or will the state only, or do you need only one? I'm still kind of confused, sorry.
You do not need both. You just
Okay.
need an indication from the community. And in Chelmsford, that would either be the chief elected board, the select board, or evidence of a zoning permit.
Okay, I have a question. Can we hear me?
Yep.
You can't see me though? Doesn't matter. It's probably best. But anyway,
Start your video.
okay,
There you go.
okay. Okay, Evan. You said something interesting just then. You said the person who's applying to do one of these things has to assure the state that the community is okay with it. Now, the community, i.e. town meeting, has voted no for this. So why are we even coming here again? And who proposed any and all of this? Who was the original person on the planning board or from the town that proposed this change?
So as I started my presentation, I mentioned that this process started with a planning board meeting of December 9th. At that meeting, there was an agenda item to identify potential zoning articles for Springtown meeting. I brought to the table the e-commerce. A planning board member brought to the table the Center Village, and several planning board members brought to the table the non-medical marijuana uses.
Okay, I would like to know the specific names of those people without me having to go back and read the notes.
I'd have to go back and review the video myself.
You're saying you have absolutely no recollection who was the proponent of that from the
Well, I
zoning
know there were
board?
multiple.
And who were they?
So Kathy,
No, I'm like really curious because this is, I'm sorry. Let me
Kathy,
step back. I'm curious about that because it sets the tone because town meeting voted this down. I want to know why what was the impetus for this? It's really what I want to know, who and why.
and so Kathy, he says
Yes,
he
I know, I'm toning it down. I apologize.
Yeah, but he says he doesn't recall. As I mentioned earlier, and you may have stepped away at that time, they'll be back next week. So follow-up questions like that can certainly be answered in the interim.
Okay, I did step away. So I apologize and I also apologize for, and I want to tone it down. But I think that is a very important point because town meeting did vote this down. So now all of a sudden this is coming back through the planning board and I don't like it. So I'm just being honest about it, and I want to know why and how. And I think other people in town would want to know why too.
As Mike Raisbeck here, can I comment?
Sure.
Sure, Mike, I'm gonna start ask you to start your
Video.
video. Hold on one second, please.
There we go. There's my head. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I was at the meeting. I don't remember precisely who brought the matter up, but I certainly am interested in it. And the reason is that while the town has very clearly said it has no interest in retail sales, and that was far and away the biggest objection at the town meeting. There are other uses that do not involve retail sales, that do not involve the some of the perceived security issues that come with it, that could very well benefit the town in terms of attracting some businesses. And something like a testing operation, for example, is a laboratory. You know, it's not a pot shop. None of the things that are up here on this list are pot shops. That is specifically not included in what is being proposed here. And of course, the town meeting will certainly get a chance, if they don't like it, to vote it down. That's what town meeting is all about.
I'm just going to point out some of the things that are on this list. Cultivator, so growing it. I mean, I'm assuming that's what cultivation means.
Yes, it is.
Manufacturer, testing, I have no problem with testing. Transporter, micro business, manufacture, process, and package. This is a lot of action revolving around a product that people did not want sold on the town within the town boundaries. So it seems like there was just some underlying motivation for this to come circling back.
Not that I know of. It's really just a matter of clarifying and potentially opening ourselves up to some business opportunities that we might not otherwise get.
I'm sorry, Nancy, you wanted to interject?
Yeah, I was going to add to it. So this originated at the Master Plan Committee. We were looking at things that could be recommended to the planning board that would bring businesses into town and industry into town. We recognize that there is absolutely no appetite in Chelmsford for retail sales of marijuana. And this in no way whatsoever changes that ban on retail sales. It does, however, address the industrial activities behind retail sales in other places with the intent to try to promote industry to move into the town. So as you go through these articles, the next two articles are specifically focused at maintaining the ban on retail. But this one right here is the industrial side of it. All of these industrial activities are very heavily state controlled. They have security requirements that frankly are similar to, and in some cases surpass, workplaces that I've been in that were top secret. They are relatively impregnable facilities. This is not a case of our kids are going to break in and steal it.
That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about traffic. I'm concerned about there will be other security issues. And I'm actually concerned because town meeting clearly stated that they were not interested in this particular field of endeavor, the marijuana field. And so to cultivate it, manufacture, and have a micro business, transport it, and research causes a lot of traffic and a lot of other issues, on and above the fact that this has already been addressed through town meeting, and somehow the planning board has come back with some sort of purpose to get the marijuana cultivation and production going here in Chelmsford.
Well,
I just,
I'm not sure
I
that-
feel it's somewhat duplicitous, to be honest.
Well,
I'm not sure that an industry based on the production of marijuana causes more traffic than the industry based on anything else. But regardless of that, town meeting will vote on this and they will decide for themselves whether they want the opportunity for businesses to move into town, or whether they want to restrict another set of businesses and keep them out of Chelmsford. And we're trying to put it on the town meeting schedule for them to decide.
So I would just remind you, before we go any further, I know you have a question, Nina, and I'll get to you right after. Just remind everybody, we're discussing, we're asking questions, we're not debating this evening. We're not entering into debate. We're not going to discuss what our vote, our recommendation might be. We're simply asking questions and providing further insight in order to understand this. And we'll ask them back next week. And I know next week also Chief Spinney will be here. And he'll be presenting his budget. And I'm sure if there are any concerns about any safety or anything like that, there's certainly questions he can be asked when he comes that evening. So Anita, you had a question.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Biogen or Novartis, and I want to do research, and they do research in drugs that, may be illegal or whether it's marijuana or what some other narcotic. How does that, like if I'm Novartis and I want to come to Chelmsford to open up an office to do research, and how does that work under our current zoning? Because their, business objectives may change, right, at any given time. They may do research in different areas.
So
would we say,
basically,
oh, no?
Under current zoning, if they wanted to be in the business of testing marijuana or testing blood for marijuana, they would be banned from town.
But they want to do research in it. That's different than
It
testing.
doesn't matter.
Where would
Today, they would be banned from town under the current bylaw.
So if they wanted to open up a shop and they say, well, we can't tell you what we're doing research on because we're a public company and we only, when we're doing research, we research stuff, right, that comes up and can change. Is there a path for them to, like, how does that work, I guess? Like, is there, I don't know, do they go to a zoning board of appeals?
Yeah, so I think to answer your question, the regulation starts at the state level. So the state, as an outgrowth of the voter referendum, the state treats or is now treating medical and non-medical marijuana and anything related to it, including research, testing, manufacturing, differently than, let's say, bioscience, life science, to the point where it now has evolved into a local zoning matter. Another example similar to this is like adult use bookstores. That evolved from the state level, filtered down to the local level, where adult bookstores are treated differently under zoning than regular bookstores. So from a zoning perspective, again, from the state moving down to the local level, towns have, whether they want to promote the use or prohibit the use, have relied on zoning to treat medical and non-medical marijuana differently because the state is doing it. And that gives the town the kind of the legal ability to call out marijuana use in their zoning bylaw. So I think that's the legal framework, but you're absolutely right. There are plenty of businesses in Chelmsford and the Commonwealth that are doing all kinds of things that the community may not know about, and if they did, may not view it favorably. But there's nothing there. But those issues have not evolved into a traditional zoning matter. Another example is now, if the town wanted to prohibit bioscience or biotech, we could. We've chosen to promote it, but we don't necessarily know all the details associated with what those particular businesses are doing or are not doing within their facility. There's other regulations that are non-zoning, fire code, Board of Health codes, other state and federal codes that they have to comply with. But the marijuana issue has boiled down at the local level to primarily a zoning issue.
Okay, so let me just, and I always get confused by this, so I apologize if I always ask this at every meeting. But all right, so I'm Biogen and I want to do research in marijuana. Our zoning doesn't allow it. What is the path? Can I go and get can I go through the Zoning Board of Appeals to get approved to do that?
Chelmsford does not allow use variances, so there is no
Okay.
legal path in Chelmsford.
Okay.
So what you
And
may
then-
be picking up on, and Kathy may have picked up on this too, while the article is proposing 7 new uses, there may be particular uses or subsets of those uses that are more amenable than others. What the planning board decided to do was advance all of the accessory uses with the understanding that we don't necessarily know which ones of those uses may be applicable to the zoning districts in Chelmsford, or more importantly, the buildings that exist in these zoning districts in Chelmsford. As of right now, similar to your e-commerce question, the only interest we get is on retail. That's the primary interest, is retail sales. However, increasingly our surrounding communities, Tingsboro, Dracut, Lowell, are approving cultivators. A testing facility was just approved in Framingham. So in lieu of retail sales, cultivation is the next one that's the most prominent.
Okay. I did have another question, but I forgot.
I have a question. I actually have a question on the cultivation thing. So we do have, I think, some limited amount of farm space still left in Chelmsford. So I'm a farmer in Chelmsford, and now I'm deciding that's not zoned. That's zoned as farming, and so now I want to grow marijuana. If this passes, do I get to have my back 40 be my primary source of income? I mean, is that what you're saying? That you're farmed for, you're zoned for being able to farm, you're a cultivator, and I have a couple of extra acres and I'm gonna grow pot.
It's another good question. So under the state cannabis regulations, cultivation is specifically not defined as agriculture. It does not meet any of the state definitions of agriculture. And as you see on this slide, the planning board is proposing to only allow these accessory uses by special permit in the CB zoning district, as well as the IA zoning district. Most of our ag land is not zoned in either the CB or the IA.
So you would be cultivating it indoors. You'd have a big warehouse where you'd be growing your plants.
Yes, that's pretty much how most cultivators in Massachusetts are operating. Is an indoor secured facility, climate controlled, hydroponic irrigation, very, very high tech.
We're expecting to have a cultivator speak next week at the planning board meeting to talk about the security that's required. If you're interested, you might want to zoom into it.
Okay, 2 more questions. I promise, then I'm done. First is, why not make this be approved by both the planning board and the select board? Like, if both of them approve it, then it can go into the state.
So I now understand your original questions. In order to apply to the state level, you need some indication at the local level that there is either no opposition or support. However, in order to get your final approvals from the state, you will need both approvals. You will need your zoning permit, and you will also need your successful community host agreement from the Board of Selectmen. So the state has essentially a multi-step process. But to begin that process, you just need a letter or indication of no opposition or conceptual support.
So
And
that's an
if
interesting.
if you don't,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, so if you don't, so you begin the process, but if I just want to make sure I understand this, but if you don't get both items from the town, the state will not approve it.
That's my understanding.
Correct?
And I would like to, let me circle with council, and hopefully I can get a definitive answer for you on this. But my understanding is the state is not going to spend their time, energy, and resources doing their full review until they know that the local approvals are in hand.
To a tangent to that, does the approval of a local board, is that unanimous or is that just the majority? So 3 people out of a 5-person board say yes, and that's it, we're stuck?
So for purposes of zoning, where these are requiring a special permit, it requires a supermajority of the planning board, which is 5 votes in the affirmative of a 7-member board. It's the highest zoning threshold you can have.
That's if it goes to the planning board, not the select board, because
Well,
I think you said it could be either or. So I'm a businessman, a person, and I know that I want to be a cultivator of marijuana in Chelmsford. And okay, so I got a 5-person board on the select group, and I have a 7-person board. So I only need to convince 3 people. So I'm going to opt to go to the select board. So does it have to be both, or?
Let me get confirmation for you on it. These are excellent questions. And as you can tell, I'm not an expert on the state process, so I'm going to have to circle with town council and likely place an email in with the Mass Cannabis Control Commission.
But just to, Evan, I guess it doesn't matter. If they go to the select board and get approval, then they go to the state, they still have to go to the planning board. Like, it requires both ultimately. So where you start is irrelevant.
This is why I mentioned in this particular unique situation, maybe the 2 boards create some sort of a joint board policy where either board is going to ask the other board for comment or hold joint meetings.
I'm going to ask can I ask one final question? Has anybody approached the town about doing any one of those A through G items? Research, transporter, laboratory, micro business, manufacturers, cooperative, or cultivator. Has the town been approached by any person or organization or business regarding any one of those line items?
No, as I mentioned, the interest that we continue to receive is on the retail sales. Now, the retail sales would very often allow someone to do one of these other accessory uses, but the primary interest to date in Chelmsford has been traditional retail sales.
I've got one more question. Have you, and this is to the planning board, have you thought about, because you said the zoning is IA or CB. Now, the way Chelmsford has evolved, we seem like our IA and CB are kind of in weird spots in town, right? We've got neighborhoods around them and stuff like that. Have you thought about, I don't want to say creating a new zone, but carving out an area specific for just this approval? Like just on 129, where it's, mostly, industrial right off the highway, or as opposed to this is in IA, which could mean down by, Byam School or, on River Neck Road, or it's like these weird pockets. And that's just because of how our zoning is in town.
Well, I can respond a little bit to that, which is, no, we have not considered cutting out a separate zoning area. Unlike the retail sales, which of course we are not considering at all, most of these activities, really all of these activities, are pretty much invisible in terms of the material that's actually being handled within the business. I mean, you're not going to see it, and it's not going to be accessible. No, we did not consider a separate zone or area for that, similar, for example, to an adult entertainment zone. I think that's the closest analogy I can come up with.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I hesitate to ask, but are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, the final article I have here is the Article 40, adult use marijuana retail.
So this is the final zoning article. This article essentially would only be acted upon if Article 39 were to pass. If Article 39 were to fail, then there'd be no need to bring up Article 40, because we would leave the existing zoning bylaw as is. If Article 39 does pass, then there is a need to make a small revision to the existing use table that currently refers to marijuana establishments and then prohibits all of them, to specifically refer to marijuana retailer, which would continue the prohibition on retail sales. This article also would adopt a new definition specific to a marijuana retailer. And as I mentioned, the entire intent of Article 40 is to make sure that the continued prohibition on retail sales remains in place.
So it's essentially to clarify language in the event that 39 passes.
Exactly.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Let me just stop and back out of here first. Come on. All right. Evan, thank you very much for coming this evening. Nancy and Mike, thank you for being here as well. Good luck with the deliberations next week, and we look forward to seeing any number of you next week on a couple of follow-up questions, and then any further things that might pop up in the interim. So thank you. All right. Evan, I know you're still on here. You haven't quite jumped off just yet. Article 41 deals with the general bylaw amendment regarding the elite prohibition of non-medical marijuana establishments. And I'm guessing that's just a cleanup if the other article is to pass, Article 39.
Yeah, this is not a planning board article. I believe the town manager is submitting this article. It assumes it would need to be taken up if the others were to pass.
Thanks, Evan. I see now it's a general bylaw, and I apologize for that. And Paul, it's just a cleanup.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I'm trying to keep on top of things and realizing that when the town prohibited marijuana, as was noted at a previous town meeting, we did the belt and suspenders approach of both zoning and general bylaws. And so if the town did want to proceed with any of these changes and we didn't act upon the general bylaw, then we would have a prohibition in our general bylaws. So again, action on this article would only depend upon what happens with the previous articles. If obviously I take no action if the other articles fail, but if it did, then we'd repeal this general bylaw because it would be inconsistent.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. All right, so moving along, we've finished the presentations this evening. Let's take a look at the review of the budget hearing and Springtown meeting warrant article schedule. So we're moving right along, and right now scheduled for next week, we have Chief Ryan at the fire department and Chief Spinney at the police department, and they're dueling presentations. Also next week, we'll have the zoning articles back for any further follow-up questions, including the questions that were raised this evening. And we expect that there'll be some resolutions and votes on those articles when they come back. We'll need to reach out to the remaining couple of bylaws. There's a general bylaw amendment for the grinder pumps. I'll reach out tomorrow to David Foley, see if he'd want to attend next week's meeting concerning that. And then also the Concom to the transfer of the Freeman Lake parcels to Conservation Commission. That concludes our review of the remaining warrant articles and the fiscal year 22 budget. So we can either plan to vote our recommendations next week, or given that we don't anticipate that the town meeting will be occurring at the end of April as it normally does due to certain restrictions, we can plan on not meeting the first week in April because there's still that ongoing first week conflict with the zoning board of appeals meetings, but the second week of April to do a vote and review and recommendation on those articles. So I'll leave it up to the rest of the committee as to how you'd want to proceed, whether you want to have those couple of presentations next week and then proceed to review and vote on recommendations, or if you'd rather have that time in the interim to digest and then not have any presentations prior to going into the voting.
Can I ask you a question first?
Sure.
With the stimulus package and all, do we anticipate changes to the budget?
See that John and Paul are still here. Paul?
The answer is no. We're not proposing any changes as a result of the stimulus package. We're still awaiting the formal regulations on the stimulus package, but those monies are limited to COVID relief, and some of it can be for lost revenue, such as meals tax and so forth, but I wouldn't propose any budgetary increases based on one-time monies. So the short answers would be no, there would be no changes to the budget expenditures or warrant article requests for capital and so forth, that I foresee at this time.
Well, the current.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I tag on?
Certainly.
To that question? So, Paul, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there briefly. My thought at fall town meeting, would there be some, would that be when we'd address the usage of the money? Is that how you see it? Because I did have some questions about how we'd reduced our what we typically pay for OPEB, and we had some back and forth on the road work last year. Are those things? Do you foresee like maybe being able to increase some road repair and or increase OPEB donations with?
Yeah, that would be at fall town meeting, and it wouldn't directly be with stimulus monies or the American recovery monies, as it's more formally known as. It'll probably come after we have our free cash certified and see what our balances are and where we would go. And the reason, again, for that is, for example, this American Recovery Act specifically prohibits the use of monies towards pension relief, for example. We couldn't use the money to fund our pension deficit with Middlesex. And however, as I mentioned earlier, it may provide some shoring up of revenue, which would then close into the free cash, which could then be appropriated in the fall. So you can kind of see it's almost like an indirect way of doing it, perhaps. You can't use it for a tax cut. That's very clear as well. And again, we're still trying to wait the regulations. And how this is going to come is we're supposed to receive the first half of the money within 90 days of the law being enacted. So we will have the first half prior to the end of this fiscal year, which means some of the money could close out to free cash if we use it for revenue loss. And then the other half doesn't come for a year later. So it wouldn't be till spring of 2022. The other thing, Kathy, is these are more like grant monies, meaning much like the schools are receiving. So they really don't go for town meeting for appropriation and approval. They really would be voted either by the school committee in terms of the funds that they'll receive from the Recovery Act, or by the select board if there's funds that come in. But again, I would expect any of that would be with significant community input, discussions with both the finance committee, planning board, and others. But again, I'm scheduled on a call tomorrow with Representative Trahan to try to receive some additional information on the federal program and guidelines, and then ultimately it will be in written form by the Treasury Department at this, in Washington, in terms of how the monies can be used. Very similar to the CARES monies that we've had so far. So I guess the answer is, to the questions are no changes in the operating budget or what we're bringing to town meeting this spring. But again, I think, the monies, for example, for infrastructure, it says in the law, you can use it for sewer, water, or broadband infrastructure. That's it. It doesn't say you can use it for highway infrastructure, but yet at the same time, they're talking in Washington about a federal infrastructure bill. So a lot of moving parts, and we'll just sort of see what we can do. And again, as we get detailed written specificity on how these monies can be used and the exact amounts, we'll provide that information out to you and to the select board and the community, so that we all know what all available monies have been made available to the town since the pandemic began, how have they been expended, what are the regulations on it, what do we have for balances, and then how do we develop a consensus plan on how to move forward.
Thank you. And congratulations I think it's just great news all around for Chelmsford to get some sort of relief for once in a lifetime.
Yeah, and it really is once in a lifetime. That's why we've got to do it deliberately and carefully. And you can imagine that there'll be a lot of thoughts and efforts out there, in not only in Chelmsford, but across the state and really across the country, and how best to use these monies.
Paul, is there any, sorry, sorry, I have to just mute it again.
No, sorry, I'm just trying to avoid background noise with the
no,
mute.
of course. Is there any feeling as to is there any possibility we would be able to go forward on the 26th of April?
No, it's not happening. Okay. The last I heard from the moderator, he was trying to work on dates in June. And I expect he's going to give an update to the select board at their next meeting on the 29th, again, is that what it is? Monday, the 29th of this month. But no, it's not happening in April. And again, it's because of the pandemic and the vaccine and the period you need after you have the vaccine to build the immunity. So we're definitely talking June, and I think you're talking mid to late June. So I would say, no earlier than June 15th, given that the students don't get out till June 15th. And the sense I have from the superintendent is a prolonged town meeting would cause disruption with the students and the school operation. So I think you're talking definitely mid-June.
Okay. So having asked that, I'll bring back my question to the committee. Given that we have two the police and fire department presentations, plus potentially the two warrant articles, which I'll reach out again for, and we have the zoning articles coming back to the extent that we have questions or that maybe further discussion given the votes this week. What's the appetite of having that be a regular meeting next week, and then coming back 2 weeks after that on the 8th of April to make our recommendations, and starting fresh right at 6:30 to start our review and recommendations?
I would say April 8th, starting fresh, but I'm amenable to whatever other people want.
Okay. I was about to say the exact opposite, but
well, that's why I'm asking.
I mean, the police and fire usually go that long. And as we've seen in every other department, there's not much to talk about. So optimistically, it won't be a lengthy evening. And then we can just kind of be done with it, but I'll go along with wherever we land.
I agree with Eric, just because my memory, I'm shot. So like the sooner we do this, now that we've just gone through all of this, the more I will remember. Sorry.
All right, we have 3 other people. What are your feelings?
Yeah, I'm with Eric and Anita. I just like if we think next week's going to be short, and based on our meeting with Chief Ryan, I don't see his presentation going terribly long,
Okay.
unless he has a whole bunch of animations to really try to outdo Chief Spinney. Then I'd rather just get it over with, because you guys know this is a crazy time for me.
Concur.
One less meeting would be wonderful.
David and Vicky, do you guys have a feeling one way or the other?
I'll go along with everybody else. Whatever the majority wants to do is fine with me.
I concur as well.
Okay. All right. It won't be just the police and fire. I'll just remind that we have 2 other articles that potentially have people coming in. The general bylaw amendment for the Garner Palms to transfer Freeman Lake, but I don't anticipate either of those belong. I just don't know, given tonight's discussions, how long follow-up on the zoning articles might be. That would be my only additional concern. But if everyone feels that next week would be better for recommendations, it sounds that way. We'll plan on doing that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. I see no press in the waiting room or on the call. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. See you right next week.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.